Good morning. Bonjour. On va commencer. We're going to start. So if you could just take your seat, grab your water, grab your coffee. Thanks for coming back. You were not scared of the first conference of the morning to be as rough as yesterday, so you came. Thank you. Just a few little details. I have an amazing volunteer team behind. They're working hard, nonstop, and some of you were using 4 coffee cups during the day. So we had to hand wash a lot of them. We tripled what we plan on using. So we just ask that you use maybe 1 coffee cup and so that they don't have to use all of that water. We're trying to save water too. So same thing for the wine glasses. I think some of you were chatting and excited and leaving your glass of wine and using 3, 4 wine glasses. We just ask that you're careful and keep your wine glass as well. During the lunch, you have one and you have one at the end of the day. That's it. So yesterday we started with a hardcore. I wanted to wake you up. This morning it's going to be a conference a bit more uplifting than yesterday. I know many of you in the room have been to New Zealand. First time I went to New Zealand was in 2009, and we spent a month there. And one of the things that really impressed me, it was their concern about the environment, but how much it was integrated. It was not a big deal. It was not like we're promoting that we're sustainable. We're not saying this is a marketing thing we're doing. We're not telling you, we're not trying you to share to the world that we're sustainable. We're just, that's how we live. That's what we do. And to me, New Zealand has always been a model. The country is very far. The last conference I did, it was online because it was during the pandemic, and I had some of the people in New Zealand involved. And this year, to me, if you follow the news, you probably know that New Zealand has made the commitment to be carbon zero by 2050. It's going to be mandatory. So it means it affects everyone. It affects how you do things at home, how you do things in your business. So it goes beyond a business deciding to do it. The government is telling you, you are going to have to be carbon neutral. So we're going to start the day talking about collective work. And we're going to finish the day talking about collective work, because in a situation where the government tells you you need to do something, even though you were already very sustainable, being carbon neutral is the next step. So how can the small producer and the big producer work together? And I think for those of you who've been to New Zealand, that's also the other thing that's extremely impressive. Often the small separate from the big. The bigger producer have sometimes money to do research and development, right? And when I wrote my book in 2021, for example, Villa Maria, the woman in charge of sustainability department, she became my best friend because she knew everyone. She would put me in touch with the small producer. She was helping them to get on board and helping them to get to the carbon neutral journey. So I'm extremely excited to welcome Meagan Littlejohn. She is the program manager, sustainable wine growing at New Zealand Wine. Going to start again. Sustainable New Zealand wine growing. Meagan is actually from Ottawa. She has a master's degree from University of Ottawa, and she focused on behavior change and background. She has a background in research and project management, and she's been working in New Zealand since 2018. And so she will share today what New Zealand is doing and how they're working together. And I truly hope it's going to inspire you somehow to do the same at your work with your colleagues, and to work together and get to where we need to be. So please help me welcome Meagan.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. My name is Meagan. I'm here representing the New Zealand wine industry. Specifically, I work for the industry body within New Zealand, so it's called New Zealand Winegrowers. We represent the interests of all grape growers and winemakers around the country, and we're actually the only national unified grape growing and winemaking body in the entire world. So it's a really nice approach, keeps everything streamlined, and it keeps everyone speaking together, which is great. So specifically my role, I work in the sustainability space. I manage our leading sustainability certification program, which is called Sustainable Winegrowing New Zealand. And today I'm going to be focusing on the climate change focus area within the industry and within the program. So like Michelle said, in New Zealand, the country as a whole has set a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. So our industry, we've also mirrored that goal, and we want our industry to also become carbon neutral by 2050, but hopefully a lot sooner than that. So today I'm just going to be speaking to you about the New Zealand approach, what the activities, thank you, the activities that we've been focusing on within the country, and the steps that we're taking to reach that goal. So really great to be here back in Canada. It was very hard to leave the height of New Zealand summer though, to come to the depths of a Quebec winter, but really great to be here. So thanks for inviting me. So this image on the screen here, it's a really classic image of a beautiful Marlborough vineyard, rolling hills, mountains in the background. This is taken from Yealand's estate, which is one of the leading wineries in New Zealand. They have installed a lot of solar panels, huge commitment to sustainability, and this image is becoming more and more frequent that we see around the country, which is great. But I just want to preface this talk by saying that even though we have been working in this space for a really, really long time, we're still not perfect. It's a bit cliche, but sustainability really is a journey, and it's going to take a lot of collaboration and knowledge sharing to make improvements and to reach those long-term goals. So I think that's why events like this conference are so great. We can speak to people that we might not speak to normally and share ideas and collaborate. So please ask lots of questions, and I'm happy to talk to anyone after the presentation as well. So a very, very quick overview of the New Zealand industry, just in case you're not super familiar. We grow grapes all the way from the very top of the country in a region called Northland down to the bottom of the South Island in central Otago. Most of the industry is situated on the eastern side of the country. That's where we usually get the hottest and drying conditions. And we have just under 42,000 hectares of grapes. Most of the industry, over 70% of all grapes, are grown at the very top of the South Island in a region called Marlborough. That's where I'm based. And New Zealand is predominantly a white wine producing nation. So Sauvignon Blanc is really that flagship variety that put New Zealand on the map. In terms of red wine, Pinot Noir is the most common variety that is grown. So that's where our wine comes from. The other side shows where our wine goes. Wine is a really important export market for the country. It usually hovers around the top 5th spot in terms of exports from New Zealand as a country. So a couple years ago, we hit the $2 billion mark in terms of values of exports, which is really great. So it's a really economically significant industry for the country. And you can see our top export markets listed there as well. So the US, the UK, and Australia are top 3. But Canada is sitting there in number 4 with, I think, a lot of room for growth. Oh, there we go. So I won't spend too much time on this. If you're here at this conference, obviously you know that sustainability is really important. But for us, I guess the reasons why we care about sustainability, first and foremost, it's to protect the people and the places that make our famous wine. So like Michelle said, in New Zealand, it's really just what people do. A lot of people have this sense of guardianship of the land that they're using to make grapes. So it's not just about setting goals and marketing yourself. It really is a way of life. So first and foremost, that's why we work in the sustainability space. We also know that consumers are increasingly demanding sustainably produced products. So you want to be able to connect with those values and reach those consumers to sell your products. At a bigger level, governments and markets as a whole are also increasingly demanding sustainably produced products. Especially in Europe with the introduction of the EU Green Deal, for example, if you're not able to back up your claims and have evidence for what you're doing, that's actually going to become a barrier to trade into certain markets very quickly. So it's a really important aspect to keep in mind. Thankfully, though, sustainability does have a lot of cost-saving benefits. It's kind of a win-win. At the most basic level, it's about using less inputs to make a product. So if you're using less inputs, you're paying less money for those inputs, of course. Obviously, sometimes there does need to be some financial investment, capital investment up front. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But of course, you can actually save money implementing sustainable activities. So sustainability means a lot of different things to different people, and you can't really be absolutely everything to everyone. So I think if you're working in this space, it's really important to set a clear framework of what sustainability means to you and what you're going to focus on in your businesses. So for our industry, we use this framework here. There's 6 key focus areas which were inspired by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So everything that we do from the industry body perspective fits into at least one of these 6 focus areas. So we focus on climate change, water, waste, soil, plant protection, and people, which is the social aspect of everything. Of course, today is all about climate change, so you'll see that every focus area has an associated industry goal. So again, for climate change, our goal is to become carbon neutral by 2050, hopefully a lot sooner than that though. Oh no, I've clicked something wrong. Oh, thank you. So in that climate change space, we're actually just kicking off a brand new program, which is going to create a specific climate change roadmap for the industry. Because it's great to set a long-term goal, like being carbon neutral by 2050, but that's a long way away. And I've actually spoken to a lot of grape growers who say, well, I'm not going to be in the industry in 2050, so, good luck with that kind of thing. So it's really important, not many, they're the minority, of course, but it's really important to break down that goal into steps and into targets that can actually motivate you to continue. And then it also helps you track how close you're getting to that goal. So that project has just kicked off literally last week. So hopefully at the next conference, I can talk to you about that roadmap. But in the meantime, we've been using this higher level approach to kind of guide our activities in this space. So we've broken it down into 4 steps: measurement, reduction, education, and communication. So that's how I'll be framing this talk today. So in terms of that first step, measurement, it's a really, really important first step, and I would never underestimate the amount of work it takes to actually measure your emissions. As that old saying goes, if you can measure it, you can manage it, and we've really taken that to heart in recent years. So since the time that we made climate change a dedicated focus area in 2019, we've really been focusing on that first step so we can get it right, so we can have good data, a baseline, and then we can know if we are improving. So that's primarily where our Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand program fits in. It's also important in the education and communication side of things as well, but really, really key for measurement. So the SWINS program is one of the oldest sustainability programs in the international wine community. It was started back in 1995 for vineyard certification, and it was really a ground-up approach. So the industry led this, which is really great. And then a few years later, it was widened to also include winery certification. And now we have a huge buy-in from the industry. About 96% of all vineyard area in New Zealand is certified with SWINS. I won't go into too much detail about this, but I always get the question, how do you get that amount of industry buy-in? There have been a lot of strategic levers that have been pulled over time. I would say the strongest lever that was pulled is if you want to use that SWINS logo on your bottle, in your marketing materials, 100% of all the grapes, all the winemaking facilities have to be certified with SWINS. So that's obviously a very high number, absolutely everything, 100%. So a lot of wineries in New Zealand now actually make it a mandatory condition of grape sale agreements. So they will not buy your grapes unless you're SWIN certified. There's pros and cons of that approach, but in general, it's a really great way to get the whole industry involved. We have a lot of influence within the industry. And if you want to participate in the New Zealand wine industry, you have to be meeting these standards. So it's a great way for us to ensure that we do have that level of sustainability across the whole industry. In a nutshell, the program is an annual certification process. So every member collects and submits data every single year. And then there's also a audit verification component. So at least once every 3 years, you are visited at your site by an independent third-party auditor to verify the information you've been submitting. So in the emission space, across all of our focus areas, but now most recently within climate change, we're collecting a lot of emissions data, which is really great. So we're not a completely comprehensive carbon accounting program, but we've been focusing on scope 1 and 2 emissions to start because that's where the industry has direct control over their activities. So we're now measuring about 80% of all scope 1 and 2 emissions. So it is giving us a good snapshot of what is going on in the industry. So for vineyards, they have to be measuring and recording their energy sources, their plant protection controls, so that's any spray that you're putting on your vineyard, fertilizers, and then some kind of smaller sources of emissions like prunings and the spreading of grape mark back to the vineyard. For wineries, energy sources as well is a huge focus. We are also collecting information about the transport of grapes and wine, but we have set our scope to begin with to the point where wine is finished, sitting in tank, ready to be either sold in New Zealand or exported. So we're measuring those transportations up to that point. And then packaging, we've recently included in the program as well. As we know from yesterday, it's a huge source of emissions for the industry. So it's important that we're collecting that data now as well. So one thing that we have a huge focus on through the SWINS program is providing this information back to our members in the form of personalized benchmarking reports, because we really want that aspect of continuous improvement. And emissions can be, I think, kind of an abstract topic for a lot of people to begin with. So it's really important that our members start having a handle on their carbon footprint, their relative sources of emissions, so that they can identify areas to improve. So this is an example of our greenhouse gas emissions report. So every single vineyard in the program, we have about 1,800 vineyards, they receive one of these reports every single year. So this graph that I've highlighted here, it's just a really nice snapshot to see, okay, these are the emission sources I've been measuring and I've submitted to SWINS. What does my carbon footprint look like? So this vineyard, diesel is by far the largest source of emissions. So that could be an area that this member would want to look into to see if they can make any reductions. Another great graph that's included in here, you'll see that your vineyard is benchmarked against the average vineyard in your region and against the average vineyard across New Zealand as a whole. So again, a nice snapshot to see, are my emissions kind of aligned with other vineyards? Are they way higher? Are they way lower? And again, that's going to help you make decisions moving forward. For wineries, they also receive a similar report. We've actually been collecting electricity use from wineries for over 10 years now, so they can see some long-term trends. So the bars at the bottom of that graph, that's that individual winery's electricity use. And then the line graph is showing the average electricity use for a winery of the same size category. So we always compare them against wineries of similar size. So this winery could see that they're actually doing very well in terms of electricity use. They're much lower than the industry average, which is great. And then this graph here is showing you your total emissions and then breaking it down into those different categories. So again, like we heard about yesterday, packaging is definitely the most significant source for this winery, and that's really typical across all wineries. There you go. So having this data also lets us look across the industry as a whole, and this information can help us know where to target our efforts, which activities to focus on. So again, we're not completely comprehensive. We don't measure scope 3 emissions just yet, but from the data that we collect, we can see that, again, winery packaging is a huge source of emissions, and vineyard fuel, winery fuel, plant protection materials, those are some key sources of emissions. So this has been informing some reduction activities. So in terms of the vineyard, diesel is definitely the most significant source of emissions. It can be kind of a challenging conversation, though, I find. I've spoken to some grape growers who say, I don't drive my tractor around for fun, so what would you like me to do? Like, everything is diesel powered right now. How can I reduce emissions? But I think this is a really good example of how a lot of little steps and individual efforts can actually add up to make a huge difference. So we crunched some numbers and we found that if you lined up all of the vineyards in New Zealand, we have about 173,000 kilometers of vineyard rows. So to put that into perspective, New Zealand is about 1,600 kilometers long from the very top of the country to the very bottom. So to do just one tractor pass across the entire country, that is equivalent to driving the length of New Zealand 108 times. So it is significant. And that one tractor pass is using about 250,000 liters of diesel. So again, it's a significant amount. But I think that's a really great way to show that looking at your management practices to start is really key. Because if every vineyard could find ways to reduce, combine tasks, or eliminate tractor passes, if everyone could just reduce one tractor pass, that would be a huge amount of savings of diesel. So, we heard about yesterday, for example, the whole focus on soil health. That's a huge focus in New Zealand, looking at things like cover cropping, for example, where you actually don't need to mow. You won't have to apply as much fertilizer. And those also mean you're not doing as many tractor passes, therefore not using as much diesel and less emissions overall. So starting with your management practices and making sure you're thinking critically about what you're doing is really important. You never want to get into that habit of just doing the same thing because that's the way you've always done it. That's not a very good reason to do anything. So think critically and start thinking differently about how you manage your vineyard. There are also some new technology, new machinery that are becoming available on the market, which is great. This is one example. This is a tractor called Oxen. It was developed by a company called Smart Machines. It's a New Zealand-based company, and they've developed these tractors for vineyards within the vineyard in collaboration with Pernod Ricard winemakers. So these are autonomous, self-driving, multitasking machines, which is really great. So instead of doing a lot of separate passes for different tasks, this is combining multiple tasks into one pass. So again, you're using less diesel at the end of the day. There's also a lot of savings in terms of the amount of people you need. One person can control a fleet of about 6 to 8 of these machines. So there's a lot of other benefits as well of using machines like this. So we're starting to see these become a reality in New Zealand, which is great. They are still diesel powered though, and obviously the ideal would be eventually to move away from diesel powered machinery. It's starting to come on the market. I'll show you one example in a minute, but it's not super accessible just yet. But ideally we would like to move to renewable energy in the vineyard. Again, we crunched some numbers and we found that if we were able to replace fossil fuel powered machines, we would reduce our vineyard emissions by about 45%. So that's huge, and a huge amount of cost savings as well, of course. So like I said, there are some machines that are coming on the market now, and I'll show you an example of one. This little video that I'm going to show you, it's of a machine that's available in an orchard now in Central Otago, but really great example of what's to come. Oh, no sound. See if we can get some sound, hopefully.
McCulloch explains it's hoped it'll help the tens of thousands of tractors on farms across New Zealand. None are quite like this one behind me. This all-electric self-driving model is the first of its kind to be imported here. And as our Queenstown-based reporter Jared McCulloch explains, it's hoped it'll help the drive to decarbonise our agriculture sector.
In Chile Cromwell, it's green for go. This new tractor powered by electricity.
This is like literally the final piece of the puzzle for our fully electric orchard.
Yes, sir.
The machine's been partly paid for through a government innovation fund. Central Otago is the first place outside of California to have one after 2 years and multiple trips to the States.
It took some convincing for us at Monarch to send one tractor all the way to the Southern Hemisphere. We see the potential in the market to be basically an example or a showcase for the world on what is possible for sustainable farming.
We've been running everything without fossil fuels for probably 18 months now.
With agriculture representing 10% of all fuel use here, that sustainability is integral to the industry's future.
As overseas customers are beginning to ask questions now of their entire supply chain, if we don't do it, customers will be going elsewhere.
We're running this tractor with the solar panels that we charge it with for around about $2 an hour. It could be up as high as $20 an hour to run a similar diesel tractor.
One of these would set you back around $140,000. The battery lasts about 8 hours, but you'll be too busy doing other things because as it drives itself, I'm just here for the ride.
At the moment, we're just trying to train it to drive up and down our rows and get used to running on our orchard.
Why would you have shadow mode?
So you don't have to get in and out of your tractor every time you open a gate.
And what happens if we just stop?
It'll stop behind us.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
That's still scary.
Workers are still required, however.
They will be able to handle all the tasks that this tractor can't do, like pruning, for example. You know, there are certain things that are always going to require a human.
Operating this tractor, though, might not be one of them. Jared McCulloch, One News.
Il est temps de mettre à jour votre système informatique.
So hopefully that just gives you a bit of insight about the new technology that is coming on the market. That, of course, as you heard, was a California initiative, but we're hoping that things like this will become more commonplace as time goes on. It's also a really great example of collaborating between industries as well. That's from an orchard, but we've had a lot of vineyard members go and specifically visit that orchard now to see how are they doing things. If you heard, they are completely fossil fuel free to run this orchard now, which is really amazing. And there's a lot of vineyards in New Zealand that now want to be the first fossil fuel free vineyard in New Zealand as well. So make sure we're not just speaking within our industry, but looking across to different industries as well. On the vineyard side of things, energy is also a huge topic, and it's been a really big focus. We are really lucky in New Zealand that the electricity grid to begin with is very green. So about 80 to 85% of all electricity generated in the country comes from renewable sources. So it's a really great place to start, but a lot of wineries are going further than that now. So very common to see solar panels installed on wineries. Some companies have invested in wind turbine farms as well. There's even some companies using vine prunings in specially made boilers to heat their winery wastewater, or not wastewater, winery water. So all these initiatives are really good examples of moving to renewable energy. The one issue, I guess, if you are investing in a new machine or new initiatives like installing solar panels, it can be a bit cost prohibitive for some producers, especially if you're smaller. Obviously, everyone has limited resources. So another thing that we've done as the industry body is partner with a government arm in New Zealand called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, EECA. And we've created a wine decarbonization pathway. So at its very core, it's all about educating producers about how they can reduce their emissions, how they can help decarbonize the economy. But they also have a really great co-funding scheme. So if you did want to install solar panels, you can apply to EECA to see if they will help match the costs of that investment. So that electric tractor that you saw, that was actually one of those outcomes of that co-funding initiative. So if you do have access to any funding like that, or need to kind of advocate for opportunities like that, it can help make emissions reduction more of a reality. I won't spend too much time on this because we heard a lot about packaging yesterday, but as we know, packaging is a huge source of emissions. As we heard, it is a challenge because a lot of consumers still have that perception that wine in a classic heavyweight glass bottle is of better quality than wine in a different type of packaging. But a lot of producers in New Zealand are at the most basic level moving to lightweight bottles. That's super common now. Also looking at recycled glass content. Again, we're lucky in New Zealand, about 75% of all glass in the country is actually recycled. So trying to up that recycled content as much as possible. We're seeing some cans, cardboard bottles, bag-in-box is definitely kind of making a comeback. But like we heard yesterday, you need to try to change the perceptions of consumers and, put premium wine in those boxes. So those are some other things that are happening from the winery side. And lastly, I won't show this video. We're having some issues with the video, but similar again to what we heard yesterday, obviously we need to reduce our emissions as much as possible, but we know that the effects of climate change are already evident in our world. New Zealand is lucky that it's a temperate climate, so we don't have the huge temperature jumps like we do here in Canada, but we are getting impacted by very extreme weather events. So you might have heard about last year, there was a huge cyclone that hit Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, huge wine growing regions, and a lot of producers were affected. So this project here is run by our research institute, the Brigado Research Institute. It's looking specifically at Sauvignon Blanc to start, and basically trying to find the most resilient clones and genes of Sauvignon Blanc, and eventually basically breeding for those most resilient genes. So trying to find the ones that are most resilient to drought, or the opposite, very high water, pest and disease resilient, all of those sort of things. So that's an important part of our journey as well. So lastly, those last two steps, education and communication, those are really important across the journey. So even now that we're just kind of starting in measurement and reduction, these are really key components that we can't forget about. So within the New Zealand wine industry, we're kind of past the point of explaining why sustainability is important, why you should manage your emissions. Now we're moving to, well, what can you do and how can you actually implement activities to make improvements? So workshops and resources, educational events, they're really key, and we're hoping to ramp these up over the coming years. And again, just that whole notion of collaboration and knowledge sharing within your own industry, across other industries, and then of course abroad as well, is going to be really key for us to reach those long-term goals and find solutions for challenges that we don't have solutions for just yet. Communication as well. We, again, heard about this yesterday through the panel on certifications and communicating your credentials. It's really, really important that if you're working in this space, you're able to clearly, concisely, and authentically communicate what you're doing in the sustainability space. So not just for consumers directly, but for buyers and export markets as a whole. You really need to be able to back up your claims. Obviously, we live in this age of greenwashing, so that aspect is really important to keep in mind as well. So I'll leave it there today, but hopefully you learned something, hopefully give you some food for thought, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Meagan. John Sutherland here. Again, you heard yesterday, if my numbers are correct, that the transportation carbon accounting is 40%. New Zealand is a pretty long way from everywhere. How do you address the perception that drinking wine from New Zealand and perhaps once again, given the distance of wine travel? And further to that, in your opinion, on ledger for accounting, should that carbon report
Yeah, it's for that second part, I think it depends what approach you're taking to carbon accounting. If you're looking at a life cycle approach, it does sit with the wineries.
Pushing forward, right?
But there are some debates on when it is your scope of emissions stop and another one ends. So it is difficult, but we have been focusing in New Zealand that it is a part of your own footprint. So you do need to be questioning your suppliers, making sure you're using the most emissions-friendly options for transportation. To the first part of the question, we do get that question a lot, so we ran some numbers, and when we look at distribution, again, we do the life cycle approach. About 25% of our emissions are coming from exporting, and about 75% come from the production of grapes and wine. So because we are really emissions friendly in terms of producing wine, like I said, we have very green grid, we use less fertilizers on average, less fuel. since it's being produced in a really emissions-friendly way, it can actually be more emissions-friendly to buy a bottle of wine overseas than sometimes trucking wine from somewhere in Europe to somewhere else. So we also ship wine predominantly on the sea in ships, which is very low emissions. So yeah, I think it's important to look at the whole piece of the puzzle instead of just one aspect, which is distribution. So yeah, I've got a little question on the website if you want.
Thank you. Any questions on this side?
Bill Littlejohn, several years in Ontario. We've struggled in Ontario to get uptake from local producers and winemakers to join in sustainability. And one of the things that we do that is expensive to water. What is the cost to a grower or to a winery in New Zealand, direct cost on
Yeah, so for this WINS program specifically, we try to keep it as cost-friendly as possible because it is kind of a market access ticket. So if you just had, basically we charge per property. So if you just had one vineyard anywhere in the country, doesn't matter the size of it, it's about $400 New Zealand dollars plus GST. For the wineries, we do break it into different size categories. So the smallest winery, again, is about $400, and then it goes up to about 1,000 for the largest wineries. So if you just have a really simple, a couple vineyards in a winery, it's quite inexpensive. Those membership fees, though, don't completely cover the cost of running the program. So we also get levy funding from great growers and winemakers. About 25% of the original costs are covered by the levy funding as well. And try to get government support as much as possible as well. So try to keep it cost effective, but it is difficult because auditing is the biggest cost for us as well.
Hi, Littlejohn, writer. When I was looking at your objectives, I noticed that you don't have a percentage of users being organic or whatever. You don't know your teacher. I understand it's managing neutrality, but at one point in time, is there a link between the two? Because in the end, you have one bottle and you can have 5 logos on it to get consumer acceptance because you lose to have no logo.
Yeah.
So is there a fight between people start and using and
switch program? Yeah. So since we're the WINS is owned and operated by New Zealand wine growers, but we're obviously accepting different choices of sustainability programs. So in New Zealand now, about 10% of the industry is certified organic. Some people choose to be in both programs for various reasons as well. I think in the past there was a bit of tension between organic versus just sustainable, but that's starting to change over time, and I think it's a pointless view to have because everyone is working in the sustainability space and just is focusing on different areas. So, we see that in organics, they're focused more on inputs to the vineyard, but like the aspect of climate change and emissions reporting, that's not a part of the organic growing system just yet. So, we definitely want producers to have different choices of what you're doing. So often it's you're either SWINS or you're organic, some people are both, and we'll figure that out just based on your values.
I was curious to know if you managed to attach some government funding into some grants and subsidies to be attached to a winery or vineyard having the sustainability certification as a on grant, or are you going to have a bonus if you're part of the sustainability scheme? And if so, did it happen right away from day one, or did the government back up a little until, let's say, 30% or 50% of wineries were members? At which point said, okay, you're going to have, if you want that grant, you have to be a member of the certification scheme.
To my knowledge, you can't really access any funding just to be a member of the program. Unfortunately, I don't know.
No, but if you want funding, let's say, them to fund installing solar,
yeah.
they're gonna,
it's conditional to being a member of this.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think if you have that goal and you want to implement something like that, you can apply for those sort of fundings regardless of that certification, which I think is good. Second part of the question, the great prices. Like, would you make more if you were certified?
No, it's just if let's say if there had been a government grant or subsidy attached to the certification or having the certification, did they wait until, let's say, 50% of the wineries were certified to attach to certifications? But
So not part of it, but I think you did ask at the very beginning, do you have more for your great prices? No.
I guess you do, but
Technically now, it's like if you're in a sustainability program, so it's we're organic, it's like we're able to sell your grapes. If you're not in one of those certification programs, you basically can't sell your grapes. So it's like all or nothing. I did hear in the very early days of the program, you would actually get a premium for your grapes if you were certified. But again, now that it's a market access requirement, you don't get more money because you're certified. But yeah, it's all good.
Il y a deux autres candidatures qui vont bien la question. Chair of the Sustainable Wine so our research program is started in 1995. A lot younger than that. That is a huge part and hard to get from source from the industry, and I see the government is for when was the government involved and trusted in the program, like from that, how long did it take for the election to take place and figure out involved?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't kind of government pushed in the early days. Back in the 90s, it wasn't this much that it is now. So it really was industry led. And a lot of producers, I guess, when you think of New Zealand, we actually only produce 1% of wine globally, but it's a very premium wine, but it's only 1%. So I think a lot of people in New Zealand have I guess that thought that we're all in this together, and it's really about brand New Zealand, not producers kind of against each other. So that was a really key reason. Growers wanted recognition for what they're doing. They wanted to raise the bar across the industry as a whole. So that's really where it came from. It's really only been in recent years, like the last 10 years, that environmental regulations in New Zealand are increasing and becoming a lot stronger. So now we're getting a lot of support from, for example, the Ministry of Primary Industries who want to continue to have Australians being so prominent in the wine industry. They can get a lot of insight about the industry, they can influence the industry. So it really is pretty recent that the government has been influencing the success of the program, I would say. So it is tricky, I think, to get buy-in at the beginning. Like I mentioned, that rule of 100% certification for the logo. Another thing that was that if you want to enter any wine into New Zealand Wine Growers and enter a competition, 100% of the wine has to be produced under a sustainability scheme, so it's for wine grower organics. So that was another motivation for wineries to join the sustainability program, because if they didn't, they would have limitations in terms of showing their wine. So it depends what kind of approach you want to take. Like, I think we've been lucky that it did kind of naturally evolve, and then there was some sticks thrown in to motivate people to join. But yeah, it's tricky to get that buy-in. But I think that market access piece is really, really important to communicate to producers now. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to have trouble getting into certain markets. So that's just going to be really valuable more and more over time.
Both at the same time. So please, one last question. Yes, thank you very much. My name is Adele, wine writer. I just wanted to follow up with you on Rose's question and know what are the differences, not in the detail, but is the SWIN certification, is it covering a lot of the organic requirements? That's number one. And number two, you think that your logo it's getting acceptable. Yeah. So it's being recognized rather than collect the data on that. I'm curious to know if for a consumer here in Canada, it means, how can they get as much as the organic?
Yeah. So for the first question, we have done a bit of gap analysis to see what the behavior gaps are, what the differences are. So we have made organic Woodlands membership street. So if you want to be in this Woodlands program and you're already fully certified organic, you basically do you have reduced requirements. So they go a lot further in the when you're thinking of inputs in the area, like chemical choices. So there's less that they have to do for squids. But then again, in the climate change space, there's no emissions reporting requirements for organics, so they still keep that full part of the swims program. So we do try to align it so that you're not, it's one work to have multiple certifications. So we try to streamline it as much as possible. In terms of recognition of the Swiss logo, we've done a little bit of research with universities in New Zealand. I think the last one was getting slightly old, like maybe almost 10 years old now. It did pretty well in the US market. I think that was the market they were focusing on, like with that solid logo. They said they would understand what it meant and sustainability aligned with their values. But I think there's a lot more that we can do in that space, just really raise awareness about when you see that Swiss logo on a bottle, what does it mean? So yeah, I think there's still more room for us to educate consumers about what it means and make sure they can recognize it and yeah, know what it entails.
Thank you very much. Thank you.